Great. Hey, thanks everyone. Astrologer Steven Birchfield has joined me today from Norway to talk about his life and experience as an astrologer. So thanks, Steven, for joining. I've been meaning to do this for quite a while.
Oh, well, thank you, Ashwin, for having me. I appreciate it. We always have nice talks.
Sure, yeah.
On camera and off camera.
Off, sure, yeah. So the main motive of this idea of doing biographical episodes is to kind of find some inspiration for astrologers who are just finding their way into the field. So one thing is like um, having experience as astrologers. Experiences of astrologers are always very unique, and the story of their coming into astrology is also always very unique. But what is more unique is that where we learn and how we learn, and whether we are part of a lineage of an astrological tradition or something like that, is even more unique. So from that perspective, I think you learned, your foray into traditional astrology was through Robert Zoller. So, or maybe earlier before Robert Smith also, but we'll come back to that. But my idea is to kind of, no problem. No, I was just going to kind of say that the idea is to kind of present your views and your experiences working alongside those people who actually dealt with the original texts. In that way, I think you also have a long-standing connectivity with Ben Dykes.
Yes.
I think we'll also talk about that. So over a period of time during the discussion. So thanks so much. You were saying something. I think I cut you off, but I didn't really
No.
mean to.
I was just going to say that my trip into traditional astrology actually began with Project Hindsight.
Right. Yeah.
That's where it began. Of course, at that time, it was, all three Roberts were involved. And,
yes. Sure.
So,
but before this, again, I think I'm cutting off, but I want to kind of save the best for some time, but we'll just get back to your early days, like your childhood or adulthood and all those things. Where were you born and how astrology kind of got to your, how you got to astrology, especially being a science professional. I think you are an engineer. So it's always wonderful to have someone from the scientific community to be practicing astrology from the Western point of view, because in the East it's a little different. Astrology is widely accepted and it is not treated as a pseudoscience as much as it is in the West. So for a person from a scientific community to be practicing astrology is very unique, and it's also an important thing as far as the growth of the astrological science is concerned. So I think from now I'm just going to listen.
You really want to go back a long ways?
Yes.
72 years, huh? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm born in America. I was born in California.
Okay.
I was born and raised for the first part of my life on the border of California and Mexico. So I grew up learning Spanish every day at the same time as my English. So it was kind of a mixed culture in that area. I got my education in University of California. That's where I got my degrees in engineering. Well, I got one degree there in engineering.
Right.
But in 1972, I left America. So it's like, of course, we were just after the Vietnam era. And so there was, a lot of my own personal desire to want to find out more about the world, and rather than what I was told on the media every day about the world.
Sure.
There's two dimensions to reality. There's our perception that's built upon, what people tell us, and then there's reality when we experience it, right? These are two very different things, and it's very hard to talk about something if you haven't really experienced it.
Sure.
So, that's when I left in 1972, and I traveled a bit first, and eventually settled down in France. That's where I met my first wife. And I had 5 children with my first wife. And 3 of them are still in France and 2 are in the States. So after that, I wanted to do something constructive with my life. Again, it's because of the whole situation with American politics and so forth. I've always been anti-war. I'm anti-war today. You know, it's like my political stance has not changed at all. I just want to help people, you know, and that's always been my main motivation. That's why I went to Africa with my wife, and we spent 5 years in Africa. I returned shortly to America for a few years, about 4 or 5 years, and then came back to Europe. So I got very sick in Africa. I contracted amoebic dysentery. You know what that is there. Okay?
Right. Yes.
I mean, it's something that's very, you get it from, I got it from vegetables. I got it from a salad, by the way, because there's water in the salad, and I happened to be amoeba in that. So, but I was very sick at that time. I lost a lot of weight. I was like skin and bones, and I had to recover my health. So that's why I went back to the States. But I don't fit there. That's not my culture. I had been out of America so long that I had no cultural roots there anymore in America, to say it like that. So I came back to Europe, and when I came back to Europe, I lived for about 1.5 years in the Middle East, in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan. I was trying to do some humanitarian help work in refugee camps there, Palestinian refugee camps.
Okay.
So, and then I came in contact with another man in the Netherlands, and through him, I started smuggling Bibles into Russia, Soviet Union. So I did that for from 1984 to around 1989, 1990. So 5 or 6 years I traveled in, and I lived most of the time inside the Soviet Union, different places. I was in Kiev, I was in Warsaw, I was in Wrocław, and I was in Poland quite a bit, actually, and St. Petersburg. I lived in a lot of different places inside the Soviet Union and under the Soviet Union, put it like this. Of course, when the wall fell in 1989, 1990, things changed in the Soviet Union. So I found, and plus I got married again at that time. Started building another family, and that's kind of when I started using my science, so to speak. Up to that time, I was just traveling and just doing volunteer work and helping and being a missionary, so to speak. Yeah.
So and you were around for 35 or 40 by then.
When I got in 1989, I was 39, so 40. Yeah.
And there was no astrology until then.
Well, when I was back in the States in the late 70s, early 80s, I became interested in astrology. I mean, who hasn't read Linda Goodman's book? And plus, at that time, I went to see Hair in Los Angeles, in Hollywood at the time. It was East LA, actually, North Hollywood. Pandora's Box was a theater there, and it was off Broadway. So it's, I went to see Hair. And of course, the song, The Age of Aquarius, kind of made me curious. What are they talking about? What is all this? So I started reading about astrology, and I learned to actually cast a chart. My math background and science, it was very easy for me to learn to cast a chart. So I understood all that. And, So I did it for all my family, and just, it was more of a curiosity at that time. I read a lot of books, Howard Sesportus, and yeah, what were some of the others? I don't have much anymore. I kind of got rid of everything. You know, Stephen Arroyo, and there was, you know, a lot of modern astrologers that of course, that's what was there in America in the 70s and 80s. There wasn't anything else.
Sure.
And then after I came to Europe, and I was busy doing what I was doing, so I really didn't have time to do that. But when I kind of settled down in 1990, I stopped traveling so much, and I started concentrating on raising the family I had, and here in Norway. And I went back to school in Norway, to NTNU, which is their side. It's like MIT in the States. You know, it's the Norwegian equivalent of the MIT.
Okay.
And I got my second degree in engineering and in systems engineering instead of structural engineering. So, and of course, I started working here. Was my main. I had to take care of a family. You understand where I'm coming from with that. You know, you've got a family. And, I quickly had another family, 7 kids. So had to shift my focus a little bit, but I became more and more interested. And it was in 1991 that I had a friend in the States who had been a student of Robert Zoller, his first course, the very basic, you know, his very, what you call it, his ground course. It wasn't like his diploma course. It was a much simpler course.
Okay.
But he was quite a zealot. He was very zealous about his, and he challenged me with a few things. He said, well, you know, I just, because I was of this opinion, well, that's very deterministic. It's very, you know, well, very modern kind of approach to it. And I thought, well, but the more, and when he challenged me, that's when I got involved with the Project Hindsight and started supporting there and getting the materials. And probably I think what really changed my attitude about traditional astrology was when I read Vicious Valence. For some reason, that just spoke to me. The guy just spoke to me. I mean, everything he was saying, I understood. You know, I didn't need. It's like it was very clear to me. Although there are a lot of, you have to work your way through Vicious Valence very closely. So I've read it.
It's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I know. And same for me. I can read something today and I'll go, wow, okay, now I get a better picture of that. And so I started reading the early astrologers. And I mean, Dorotheus, it's kind of iffy because we don't have his work as it was written. We only have a paraphrase that's done by a Persian that has very, you know, clear narrative that he's pushing.
I think Dorotheus' work was not available until Ben Dykes translated, but I think there was one version which was translated by David Pingree, but I'm not really sure.
Yes, that's the one I'm talking about, because that's the one I first worked with.
Okay.
And then afterwards came Ben Dykes' translation of it. But again, we have to go back and realize that this is a paraphrase by a Persian who had a clear narrative to his understanding of astrology. And I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying that he had his historical biases and his astrological biases. So those we find amongst all the writers. I don't care who they are. Oh. So when you first start reading them, it's very easy to get involved with it because it was very new. It was all, you know, quite a revelation. And then as I was reading, I could read all these things, but there was just no clear methodology to it. do this, do this, do this. If you've read Chris Brennan's book, of course, the method is broken down and put into a clear form there, but that's not the way you receive it from the authors. You know, it's very broken. These people like Chris Brennan and even Martian, they've been able to try to put it into a more constructive form, you know, to help the astrologer actually make delineations of the chart. But still, at that very early stage, okay, in early 90s and through the 90s, there was just no clear, for me, it was a lot of information, and being an engineer, being a systems engineer on top of it, I wanted to see things in a way, I wanted the concept to be put in a way that I could actually use it, that inconsistently, not just, you know, a one-off, okay, this means, okay, but in the next chart, you look at it and say, why doesn't that fit, you know? I'm sure everybody's experienced that kind of thing. And instead of kind of digging in and finding out why things are why they are, people often accept things and then just kind of push those things under a rug. Don't really investigate it, you know. I mean, it's human nature. I'm sorry. I know human nature. I lived enough in this world to understand human nature. I'm guilty of that human nature, okay? So that's when when was it? It was in 2005, 2004. I have to think now. Yeah, 2004. I decided, okay, I need help here to put it all together. And of course, I knew Robert Zoller had been a practicing traditional astrologer for a long time. So I sent a letter. Well, I emailed him actually, said, I would like to get in your course. And the answer I received was, well, I'm full, sorry, I have no room. So I said, okay, well, that's that out the window. And then about a month later, I got a new email from him. And he said, well, one of the students dropped out. Are you still interested? I said, absolutely. So,
sure.
So that's how I got into the course. I think I was probably one of his last students before he was making a break at that time with the new library in London. And there was a lot of, I'm not going to go into that. There was legal battles between them. And, so he was rewriting his whole course to break out of the mold that they had, okay? And it was called the new diploma course. So he explained it all in emails to us as we were taking the course. So, and he corrected all my papers and commented on them. So I had this email exchange with him quite often, you know. Although at that time, I think his illness was actually getting pretty bad. It was hard for him to concentrate, to talk, to, you know, hold a lot, you know, to be able to work at it. He had, what's it called? Parkinson's disease, right? So that affects your nervous system, and it made it very difficult for him to answer letters. And sometimes, you know, letters came very late, but we had a very good conversation anyway, most of the time.
Sure.
And I finished the course a year later, took the exams and passed it. That's why I can have the AMA after my name, because that was his diploma.
Right.
To give you that right to put that after your name, that you're a practiced astrologer, you've had a course, and that you passed the course. He had a, you know, standard, and had to, you were given a chart to delineate. You didn't know who it was. And, you just had to make delineations, and he graded the course, and you had to have over 80% in order to graduate, okay? In order to, which was kind of a high standard, you know. He, you know, 80% is even high for a university to pass, you know. So, I mean, I did well enough. So it was only up in the 90s. So that's, after that, that's when I kind of started going on my own. I started doing charts around that time, 2005, 2006. But because I was working full time, as I said, I went back to school, I got my degree there, and then I got jobs in Norway, working as a professional engineer. Okay, first in the shipping industry, building ships. I was a systems, because I had systems engineering was my, so that's kind of why I was taken into that job for those qualifications. And I worked with this one company for 6 years, and then changed, and because I moved and went to another place in Norway, and got a job with a consultant firm that was both architects and engineers working together. I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and then the city or the county where I live was going to do a lot of urban development, rebuild the whole center of their cities. They have 2 cities here. And so they were actually looking for somebody who had a little international experience and who spoke.
Okay.
So they hired me for that job. So, and I worked 11 years with them as a systems engineer. But during that time, I did practice a little astrology, but not quite as what I'm doing now.
Okay.
I've written a lot of things over the years, and kind of as I saw them, and I go back now and I look at some of those things that I've written, and I have to change them today because my opinions change, because I understand things a little differently. We grow, and leaving things in a constant, the problem with a lot of people is they can't change, to be very honest, but I've been changing my whole adult life, so it's not been so difficult for me to change my position or change, how I look at things.
Okay.
I think if anything, I've become even more traditional than I used to be when I first started. I think I've become even more hardcore, if you will, mainly because, as I've told you, in writing my course, you've seen all the papers so far. The whole idea behind it is not just to write a course, but I want to, it's kind of a documentation of how I have grown in astrology as well.
That's right, because I kind of had this opportunity to kind of study the work, and you also mentioned, for example, if you want to talk about temperament, you mention the idea of talking about temperament in traditional astrology, and you explain temperament, and then you also go on to say that how it is applicable and how to study this in charts, which kind of covers the entire circle in terms of approaching, working, and then analyzing or implementing. So, which is based on your studies and opinions over the years, and as astrology.
Yeah, it's a compilation of my journey, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
There are things that are talked about here and there, but never really focused on. That the whole section, there's 4 there's 3 parts of that. The main parts are called the living soul, where I go into temperament, I go into qualities of the soul, I go into the element and figures. That's what I'm finishing right now.
Okay.
But because all of these things are talked about in the historical record, but it's a piece here, and it's a piece here, and it's a piece here, and there's really no cohesion between all of what they say, although there is a cohesion conceptually to what they're saying.
Right.
Okay, but nobody's really sat down and said, okay, it's like this. The first time I actually read a chart is this one that Levente lost. Oh, he translated this Ibn Ishaq Ali ibn Ishaq is the name of the astrologer. And he translated this, it's not a complete chart, but it's a lot of it's there, you know, about how he delineated the father, the mother, success and children. And he goes through the whole method of delineation, basically.
Right.
And he also goes into the qualities of the soul. He talks about that. And it was the first time that I've actually ever seen a chart where an astrologer breaks it down, and he follows Ptolemy very closely.
Yeah.
So
qualities of the soul is also part of Ptolemy. So
yeah, it is. Well, he's the one who offered it, and Rhetorius is both Hephaestion and Rhetorius. They said, well, if you want to know about this, you got to know Ptolemy. It's here in Ptolemy. You know, you got to follow Ptolemy, right? And of course, as you go into Europe, if you follow it into Europe, then they talk about it. But because Ptolemy, he makes some mistakes. But of course, and I have to, in my work, I have to kind of clarify some of those things, because he talked about some of these things, and it was a point of contention between some people. For example, he would say, when Mercury is Oriental, that's when he's Occidental. Or when he's Occidental, that's when he's Oriental, for example.
Okay.
An Occidental Mercury, Robert Zoller called Oriental. And people just freaked out. They're about, no, in the historical record. But you have to understand what's behind that, you know. And the fact is that the early astrologers made no connection between, I mean, the reason why they talk about being Oriental and strong and things like this was because, first of all, the moon, and second of all, because of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Okay, those were the superior planets. But what the distinctions they don't make are understanding what's behind that. For example, the moon is faster than the sun.
Sure.
So actually the moon is going to make aspects with the sun, whereas the sun makes aspects with the superior planets. You understand there's a difference there.
Right.
And this is why, and you have to stop and say, well, okay, the moon is waxing strong when it's Occidental, not when it's Oriental, right? And so early astrologers like Ptolemy, even though they were scientists, they didn't grasp the fact that Mercury and Venus actually have cycles themselves.
Sure.
And those cycles are just like the superior cycles, except because they're faster than the sun, they make aspects with the sun, right? And therefore, their strength is just like the moon's.
Sure.
Okay? When it's Occidental, they're waxing strong. They just came out. They're starting a whole new cycle, which is the conception behind why a superior planet was leaving the sun, heliacal rising, coming into newness of a new cycle, right? That was behind the whole why it's strong at that point, you know, and why they were strong in an Oriental position. The problem is that's not the case of either Venus or Mercury. Mercury, when it's Oriental and Sun, is getting ready to set. He's ending his cycle. So Ptolemy, he didn't explain these. Actually, it was Al-Biruni who made this very clear in his book on his introduction to astrology. And so it kind of put things, this is where Robert Zoller was coming from, okay? That actually Mercury's strength was when he was Occidental of the sun and waxing, just like the moon, when she was Occidental of the sun and waxing, was strong.
Sure.
And then it made sense that, well, these three planets actually are the planets that are given over and over about ruling the qualities of the soul. Dorotheus talks about the ascendant, moon, Venus, Mars, Mercury. All of these things it's all this, the inferior planets, as they're called today, because they're faster. They make the connections. Okay. Of course, in the astrological sense, Mercury never makes aspects with the sun. Okay. But his cycle is still the same.
Yes.
Okay. His cycle is still the same because he's going so fast, and his movements. The same is true with Venus. Venus can make a sextile. And if you're reading Ptolemy, he says, well, none of these had strength. He said the only ones that actually have strength are the moon and the superior planets. That's why when he explains the quality of the souls, he has one explanation for them and another for the inferior planets, because he didn't consider them strong at all. Okay? One way or the other. As a matter of fact, he gave them no strength. And he says so in his work. So you kind of have to understand what they were writing about, what it was based on. Now, Mercury, when it's rising at the ascendant, of course, is strong, because that's his preferred place in the astrology.
Yes.
Right? It's the first house on the ascendant. I mean, he's happy there. That gives him strength. But Mercury could also be occidental in doing that. You know what I mean? That didn't make it oriental and strong. That made it strong in a place, in a position. And of course, all the planets, when they're at their heliacal rising, is very significant. It's the place where they're coming back into the world. And, I mean, some of the Arabic the Persian astrologers had these ways of describing things like this, like a man who's been sick and now is getting out of bed and he's strong again, things like this. Metaphors to try to explain it. But I mean, you have to, when you go back to Dorotheus again, you go to early astrologers, they were very clear that there's a difference between a planet that had set under the sunbeams and one that was getting ready to come out of the sunbeams, that had passed the sun. And they said, well, if it's in 7 days of rising, then it's very auspicious, well, it's still under the beams. Is it destroyed or is it not? I mean, there's a lot of things that I had to start asking questions about, because you read about it, and then of course I've done hundreds of charts now. I mean, not of celebrities or people, in the news or anything.
I think
I've done.
Yeah, everyone has their own clientele, so.
I do actual charts of people, and do I get everything right? Sometimes I've made mistakes, and then they explain things to me, and okay, now I understand. And then the thing makes more sense, because we have a multitude of delineation. If you're just looking at the sun has so many significations in the chart.
Yes.
I mean, you can make a list that's this long, of all its significations. And you have to kind of see how it's connected with everything else. And you have to look at the whole chart, its position in the chart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to begin to understand the significance of it, So all these things that I'm sharing with you now, this has kind of been my growth in astrology. This is things that I've had to deal with, because, as I say, as a systems engineer, I want something that's consistent. If I'm building a house, or if I'm designing something or putting some systems together, if they don't work, I can't use it.
Right.
It has to work, and it has to work consistently. I can't just do it here and go to the next one and it doesn't work. Then something's wrong. Something's wrong in the process. This is called realistic systems analysis. And so for me, because I don't really believe the planets do anything. Okay, that's my own. As you pointed out, I am a scientist, but I do believe it's a conceptual language that describes, our lives and everything else that we see in the world. And as a conceptual language, just like mathematics is a conceptual language, and we use mathematics in everything,
Yes.
You can use astrology and everything if you understand the conceptions behind it. So that's been my main point of writing my whole course. Kind of, let's get down to the conceptions. Let's get down to strip away a lot of preconceived things, or things that when all these things were starting to, the traditional astrology was coming up in the 90s and 2000. I mean, a lot of people wrote things. They were inspired to write things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But they were writing without having a complete knowledge about things at the same time. So there was a lot of personal bias, a lot of personal understanding in things, which I think today can be demonstrated quite the opposite, or maybe build on those things to explain further the qualities of it.
Mm.
And because we live in an age that of quantum mechanics and quantum science, we know we've kind of lost a feeling with the quality of things. Okay, I just had a discussion with one of my students about Antisha, and reading Abu Mashar, he's very clear to describe the qualities of those instead of, well, it's a shadow degree. Well, so what does that mean? You know, how does that delineate the chart? Well, it means that it's there. No, that's not what they actually said. You know, so it's like you have to break things down again and look at different ideas and different conceptions and try to, my emphasis, what I focus on is trying to make it a consistent conception so that when I'm going through charts, I don't have to say, well, this doesn't work here. You know, what's wrong? What's wrong with my thinking? You know, and I've had to do that at times and say, well, okay, is my idea wrong? Is what I'm looking at wrong? Or, you know, is there something else involved that I just don't see?
Sure.
Because I'm not aware of that thing yet, you know? And there's a lot of reasons why, you know, those things happen. So it's a continual journey for me. You know? I don't feel like I've arrived at anything, but the whole purpose behind me writing a course was not to, okay, I'm retired now. I have a pension. I don't need this as an income, to put it like that.
Right.
For me, it's just been, it's kind of like my legacy, what I want to leave behind me.
I think that's very important.
You know, that's more my idea behind it. I don't, of course, you posted recently on Facebook, you had a little discussion about, you know, people charging for readings and things like this. And there was back and forth about people who don't have money and people who have money, or, you know, people asking exorbitant prices. And,
yeah, that's my point. People asking astronomical prices. That's my point.
You know, and for me, it's not been an issue about money.
Sure.
But at the same time, I asked money for things simply because I think somebody had posted and said, well, when people have to pay for something, it's worth much more to that person.
Right. No,
You
I
know?
agree with that. I'm not saying
that's-
people should. I'm not saying astrologers should resort to doing free consultations. That's never my point.
Yeah, I understood. I understood.
There is obviously
There was a lot of back and forth, and
Yes.
I didn't jump into the conversation because people were saying things that I would have said anyway.
Right.
So there's no need to jump always into conversations and, you know, make yourself known. I do take a fee, but it's a very reasonable fee. And I do it for everybody, because if I do less for this person and more for this person, then I feel like the person is paying more. Why should he pay more? Because he has more money? You know, I don't know his real situation. I mean,
it's a very gray area.
So I just make it across the board. Everybody's going to pay something, and I make it a reasonable fee. Period. Okay.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I'm not interested in the money. That's not. But it's interesting. For me, it does the work that I'm investing in things. It does support that a little bit, you know. Although, I mean, my pension is enough. I can live comfortably. I can live, you know. I don't need to stress over things like this. So it's never been a motivation for me, is, you know, to make money off of something. And so I'm able to spend a little bit more time. As I've told my beta students, I have several beta students. And there's several people who actually read through my material so that they can correct things and send me back feedback so that I can, I wanted to make it the best that I can.
Right.
I know it's not going to be perfect, but
No.
I just want to make something the best I can.
I think the experience and the willingness to kind of learn and share is probably one of the most important things that is very important, not only to uh, extend your legacy or leave your legacy, but also in terms of growing the art and helping a few other astrologers who are actually willing to learn it. So I think that is far more important.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, this is why I have had a lot of people write me and ask me, can I take your course? And well, I ask why. That's my first question. Why do you want to take it? What's the purpose of it? And I want to get to know people a little bit before I jump in. And so I have, as I said, and they know it's qualified. I said, the first part of my course is finished. And, but the second part I'm working on. I'm still in the process of working on, because these subjects, as I say, they are not, you can't go to the written record and say, they're talking about the Almaton figures. No, I mean, first of all, they talk about the predominator, then they talk about the ruler of the chart, then they talk about, you have a whole evolution of this, and it's looking at everything as a picture and saying, okay, well, what is it that each one was trying to arrive at? What were they talking about, And a lot of assumptions, I think, have been made about Hellenistic astrology. I don't agree with all of them. But that's neither here nor there. It's my opinion, So it's like everybody has an opinion. So everybody has a nose on their face. So for what it's worth, you know what I mean? Yeah, I came to a point where earlier I kind of wanted to, I want to have an opinion, So I was always jumping in and talking about things. And as I kind of grew in astrology, I realized why do I need to speak up about things? If I'm asked about something, that's different, but to always be jumping in as some kind of authority, I kind of fell out of that. I was in several groups and I just quit all of them and no longer, for me, it's just practicing astrology. I have clients every day. I work on client charts. I'm working on this course every day. So that's my main focus in life is, I think I recommended you read Theophilus because Theophilus really impressed me.
No, Theophilus is one of the most fascinating texts.
It is, isn't it? Here was a guy. He was a practicing astrologer. I'm sorry, hands down, there's nobody out there that I've seen. He worked first with one caliphate. And because he was so good at his job, the caliphate that defeated that first caliphate wanted him to be their astrologer.
Right.
Wrap your head around this, here's a guy counseling this one caliphate to fight against this caliphate. And when they lose, they say, hey, we want you to come and do work for us. To wrap your head around that is
astrology being as practical as it can be. So.
Yeah, and he had to be good at what he did.
Sure.
Otherwise he would have just killed him with the rest of them. When they took over power, they would have got rid of the guy also.
Right.
The problem is that he obviously, even though we don't have so much from him, what we have is very limited. And when I was reading through Levente's translation of these sayings by Shaddan, Abu Mashar mentions, well, there's some astrologers that their records were locked away by certain caliphates, because they didn't. You have to ask yourself, well, why were they locked away? What didn't they want people to know? It's some interesting stuff. I mean, you can speculate for hours and hours about it, and it is all truly speculation. That's what it is. But it's entertaining when you don't have anything else to do to speculate. But I love Theophilus's work.
Right.
And as I told you before, I like it because he had Hellenistic astrology. That's what he had. You won't find Persian astrology in
Theophilus.
And he took and he adapted to find answers in the mundane world, which was quite unique. It was really, really unique. Now, maybe he had some Persian influence because he does Ingress charts, first of all. Okay, though that's his whole little book on cosmic conceptions, he called it. It's all about ingresses and how to look at them, and especially on what to look for in them. That was very interesting. I mean, he applied Hellenistic astrology to that, finding the high leg. If you wanted to know the Lord of the Year was to predominate. For him, that was natural.
Right.
To look at, the releaser. Who is the releaser of the chart? And that was going to be the Lord of the Year. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? He adapted his astrology to his situation, which was very unique. That's what he did. Is no other astrologers really. We don't have any demonstration of that really from other astrologers. So I really like Vitius Valens. He has over 100 and some charts in his. So Vitius Valens was a working astrologer.
Right.
Again, I mean, although we don't really have everything that's said. I mean, what Robert Schmidt talked about when he talked about the manuscript that we have is very corrupted. It's very this and that and the other, and it's been tried to restore. In my discussions with Levente, we talk sometimes about this. And I know he has a real burden to make a translation that is minus a lot of the additions of Pingree and perhaps
Right.
Schmidt as well, to get something that's a little bit more a cleaner edition, to put it like that.
A Valens?
Yeah, a Valens, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, I don't know I haven't talked to Ben in a long time now. So I really don't know what he's doing. The only thing I understood was that they stopped working on Valens for some reason. I can't answer anything because I haven't talked to Ben in a long time. So I don't know what he's working on. He was supposed to, I know he was working on his course at one time. How far on that? It's not been released or anything. So there've been a lot of, challenges in the world in the last 2 years that has affected a lot of people in different ways.
Right.
Massive lockdowns and, people losing family members. And I mean, it's been, a very stressful time having to deal with what I call fear porn through the media all the time. I mean, people have been living in a spirit of fear rather than of peace and a sound mind, and so it's been hard in the world. Okay, so you have to, for some people, for me, it didn't really affect me in any way here in Norway because Norway never went this austere route of everybody's got to wear masks and everybody's got to isolate and everybody's got to do that. No, they never went that way. Norway had no excessive mortality the last 2 years. So, although it's climbing now, but I'm not going to get into that. There's a lot of science behind that. But just as to say that this last period of time has been difficult, I think, for a lot of people. So things have been put on the shelf, maybe Ben's been involved with things. I have no idea. So I can't answer for any of that. And I'm sure when Ben's ready, he'll let us know what he's doing. Normally he's very faithful about sending out a newsletter. And he hasn't done that many, many months now. So it's my hands are up. I worked with Ben for a while, up to his release of Saul, and Abu Mashar, those books.
So that's interesting. So I wanted to get to that. So what was your role in? I think Ben Dykes also mentions some of your opinions and comments in the footnote.
So he did that. I was a little shocked that he did that.
No, but I wanted to ask, like, how far your association with Ben goes back, and what is the role that you played, or
Ben
probably how did you help him, or how did you kind of get associated with him in all these translations? Because I think working with source texts is one thing, but to be able to kind of find out which other author has already done such a work or spoken about a specific thing, what currently the translator is dealing with, is entirely another thing. So maybe people need help, translators need help. And as I see, your unique skill is to kind of identify which author has actually written which concept or terminology in which book, probably even page number. So I think that is probably one of the reasons why you had this associations with Ben Dykes. So I just anyway, I was just going to ask this question. So
yeah, well, I actually, of course, I've read all of his translations, so I followed him. But I met Ben. When was it? It was around 2016, and he did a seminar in England. And of course, I'm friends with Sharon. And she said, Ben's going to come and do this. Why don't you come for a visit at the same time? And, we'll go to the seminar together. And so that's when I actually met Ben.
Okay.
And we had some really nice discussions that, off the record. And, because he stayed with Sharon and I stayed with Sharon. So we got a chance to talk and kind of get to know each other. And I remember when he first, I must have a horrible reputation amongst people, because when he met me, I remember he looked at me and said, "You're nothing as I imagined you." I thought, okay, well, thank you. I don't know if I should say thank you or what, but it was kind of funny because, people make opinions of people they never met, and so, and we had a very good connection at that time. We made excellent, we talked about different ideas and things. After that, just right after that, he was beginning to translate Saul. So he contacted me and he said, "Would you mind reading this for me, my translation?
Right.
And any comments are welcome, So I was reading through it. And at that time, I was kind of winding down. I was really busy at work too. That was my last 2 years in my job, So I was very busy at that time, and I wrote a lot of comments and things and sent them to him. And, checking his spelling, checking ideas, concepts and things, whatever. And then he wrote me and said, "Well, I'm going to translate, the next book I'm going to translate is Abu Mashar's On Solar Revolutions." So he asked me to do the same thing. Now that book I was able to really concentrate on, because by that time I was finished with my job. So I didn't really have anything pressing on me anymore. I was able to really concentrate and went through the book. As a matter of fact, I did a lecture on that book in Turkey at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Because I had Ben's input and I was able to sit down and I gave a very a pretty intense lecture on Abu Mashar and his methodology and things like this in Turkey for Barish, her school.
Barish Island, yeah.
And but that was at the time I was actually reading through it. I was studying it. And, my comments back to Ben, and I was surprised that a lot of those comments he added as footnotes in the book. And I thought, okay, wow, thank you for the plug there. No, I mean, it was very respectful of them, to take those comments and then, give credit where credit's due, so to speak. So I did appreciate that. I thought that was very generous of Ben to do that. Besides me putting my course together, there's one part of the course that Ben had already done a whole lot of work on in a translation. And I said, Ben, do you mind if I use this part of your book? He said, absolutely, go ahead. So sent me the PDF for it. That's Ben. Ben is a very wonderful man. Okay, he is. I'm sorry. He's got a very big heart. He's very generous, and I really respect his work and what he's done. So that I was able to contribute anything. I mean, come on, the man did all the work on the book.
Yeah.
My contributions were like a little drop in the bucket compared. And but I was glad that I was able to contribute something. Ben did an absolute fantastic job in translating the book. It's the first translation from the Arabic we have of that whole book, and everything's in it. Okay, so it's a whole new world, actually,
Right.
So that's kind of how I got involved with that. And then with Abu Bashar, I wasn't really helping him with Abu Bashar because he had Charles Burnett's translation on that. So he had a lot of, it was more of a scholastic attack on that. And he was translating, I think, from, it was the Arabic that was used by the May to translate that book. And of course, Charles Burnett used several manuscripts to translate his, to get his results. So Ben was using his to kind of, and Ben being the astrologer, where Charles Burnett is not an astrologer. So Ben kind of read between lines sometimes and his translation, but they're very similar. I mean, might be one or two words that Ben chose another word or something,
Okay.
There's not the difference is minuscule, and Ben's work has been read against Charles Burnett's massive work, so it's an excellent quality. I have to say that. What Ben does is usually a very good quality. Okay, so and of course at a price that's much more affordable for all of us poor astrologers.
Right. That's the biggest point.
I mean, I forget what I paid for this copy from the great introduction from that I got through Brill, that Charles Burnett. I keep wanting to think 250 euros or something like this was the price. Yeah, it was really, it was outrageous, but I had ordered it many months before. So I've been waiting for it for over 2 years. I had ordered it because they kept saying it's going to come out, it's going to come out. And Charles Burnett kept delaying it because what's his name? Keiji
Yamamoto.
He passed away also while working on this book. So there were certain delays and things that got in the way. Finally, Charles Burnett did release it. So it was a massive work. I mean, there's a lot of work in that volume. I mean, it's the first Arabic translation of Abu Mashar. I mean, we've had Latin translations, and Charles Burnett has had several lectures where he talked about the iffy quality of the Latin translations, and that there was often a narrative being pushed in those translations, when I say narrative, it means a biased opinion.
Right.
So to get something that's, kind of cleaned of all those narratives and cleaned of any bias and kind of a strictly translated material is really important, which is what Levente is doing, actually. I mean, this is what he's now doing with the Greek material. And you have to, Levente is doing a fantastic job on that. Like I said, one a side project that I have that I'm going to be putting up on my own website is I've gone through this Ali ibn Ishaq's delineation and pulled it apart so that people can see where he gets his information.
So you also, I think you translated William, a mundane astrology book of
Ramsey.
Yeah.
I didn't really translate it. I wouldn't call it a translation. It was I was taking the Old English and trying to put it in a little bit more current
understandable English. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that it's not, get rid of the these and the thous and the thus and therefores and all the flowery part of English language is beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful in English. Okay.
Right.
But I felt like a lot of people just could not grasp it. I mean, somebody who's, Norwegian speaks, who's not a native British,
let's take my own example.
I mean, then it's very difficult to read. It can be very difficult. So I just went through it. I also was able to compare it to certain things. For example, in Abu Mashar, when he talked in mundane astrology, I was able to point out Ramsey's inaccuracies and his lack of information that he had. And he was making conclusions based on insufficient knowledge of what he was talking about. So I did it for a reason so that people could understand that, well, while astrology entered into Renaissance Europe, it was not as pure as people like to think it was.
Sure.
There was a lot of misunderstandings, I think. I mean, when you start looking at the charts people were doing, and Cardan, for example, and he invented a chart for Martin Luther because his own bias was that Martin Luther was the Antichrist. So because he's Catholic, right? So Martin Luther, who nailed the 99 Thesis on the church wall, he was against a lot of the policies in the Catholic Church. Of course, Cardan saw him as the Antichrist, so he made his own chart and put Mars on the ascendant. Let me tell you, when I started really studying the charts that people offered in the Renaissance, I have to put a big iffy, lots of iffy, because people had very particular biases. I'm sorry, they did. Moran had his own biases. All these people did. Cardan. There are some writers that tried to follow what they had from that period as closely as possible. Bonatti was very creative. I mean, he saw when he was writing on the qualities of the soul, it took Ptolemy's work, and he was trying to straighten out a lot of the things. He had just as much problems, I think, understanding it as a lot of people have. And like I said, some of the misunderstandings, I think, are actually from Ptolemy himself, not really grasping the significance of the inferior planets, things like this, which cause a lot of people to write different things at different times. So
sure. I think I wanted to ask you one more thing. You were involved with this classical astrologers blog, where I read some of your posts, which was quite interesting, with Peter James Clark.
That's a long time ago. Yes.
Yeah, I've known your work only through that forum. So So I think, so how long were you associated? I think you wrote like 2 or 3 articles. I'm not sure how much you've written, but I was basically introduced to your work through that particular platform.
Yes. Well, in my foundation has not changed. Okay. My foundation is still the same. How I've written things over the years has changed. Yes. As my understanding, of course. I mean, this is what, if I have a complaint, okay, we call it criticism or complaint. A lot of modern astrologers have written things over the years. And as they grow, instead of going back and correcting those things or making amendments on those things, they just leave it there on the shelf. I don't like that. If I've written something and afterwards I realize, this is why I have several revisions of just on the Fidaria, for example. I'll just take that as an example. I've revised that 3 times. Not big revisions, but I've learned things along the way that were very helpful to help clear up any confusion about the Fidaria.
Right.
So when I got, for example, Pingree's book on the 1000 by Abu Mashar, and was able to actually read firsthand things that are in there about the mundane Fidaria, that they're not even close to the same as personal astrology. They're very different. Okay, there's different concepts behind it, different ideas. So I've had to, I mean, I've written a lot of stuff over the years. Some of the stuff I threw away. I look back on some things I leave because, okay, I understand. I mean, it was kind of, that's where I was and here's where I am today. Which is one of the reasons I had started my own website, so I could put material that is more up to date on there.
Right.
I just don't have a whole lot of time to spend on it. I have several projects that I've been working on that I think would be very interesting projects. You got me onto one project. That was on the decennials.
Right.
You got me looking at those a little bit closer.
Right.
And the ideology about it. So I've written a whole paper about it. That with just some suggestions that people. I use my own suggestions today. I made my own program that will give me the decennials, but they're not decennials. That would be the wrong term because those are divided into tens, right? That's what decennial means. I looked at the order, and I was impressed with the order of the planets, how they were taken. That one was a luminary, one was one of the releasers, and then the planets as they followed those releasers. And it dawned on me, well, if the sun is handing off to, let's say, Venus is the next planet, well, that's by primary direction.
Yeah.
That's because that planet
rises next.
The one after that would be carried to it. The one after that, not carried to it. So at the foundation of this was a concept. And that's why I think the order was taken. I can't prove it, and they don't say that. But why would you go in the order of the chart otherwise? I mean, because, well, they can't carry there. That's what primary directions are.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, well, what if you actually calculate those primary directions and then fix a lifespan that they were using, for example, 75 years, and divide it proportionally and so forth, as they did. I didn't divide it equally with 7 planets, 7, I used a proportion as their minor years, for example, which is what they did as well. I used a similar proportion to that total period. And it gave me some very interesting results. I have to be honest. But I'm not going to say, well, this is a new Time Lord system. I was curious, because they couldn't make these calculations. Okay, it's very simple. They could, the most they could do was to work either with equal degrees of longitude on the ecliptic, or they could use ascensional degrees. That was kind of the limit of their capabilities. I have to say capabilities at that time, their mathematical skills.
Yeah.
And that's why when we read a lot of text, when they talk about directing the high leg, for example, if it's a sun, for example, they're always in ascensional degrees, and, you know, but that would be a mistake to use ascensional degrees, because if the sun is, you know, in the 11th house or in between the, I mean, you have to start mixing your degrees in order to move degrees to it and planets to it. So it's a, you know, just the astronomical mathematics and things is what they didn't have necessarily the tools to do the job.
Right.
I do. I have great tools. I can do it in an Excel spreadsheet, you know, very easily. I, you know, put all these things together. So, but anyway, I was writing about it. Well, what if it's this, and just how it could be done. Okay, it's not thou shalt do this. That's not what I'm saying, or but I just thought it a very interesting exercise, to put it like this. Sure. What if you actually just use those arcs of direction and actually use those things?
Like you're currently you're majorly working on a few projects, not few, but many projects.
I have a lot of projects.
And also, you do consultations.
Yes.
So, and people can reach out to you through birchfieldastrology.com, right?
Exactly.
Yes. So, and you have consultations page, and your course is you know, a work in progress now, but I think
it is definitely a work in progress.
Yeah,
it's nowhere near finished yet. The beta students I have understand that.
Right.
Okay. And so they're patient. They get time to work through the lessons. And at the same time, we've had one online meeting with all my students, and where we can discuss things that come up. And I plan on more. And
sure.
As I mentioned to you, don't ask me why. I have absolutely no understanding how that happened. But I'm very popular in South Korea.
That's what I was not sure whether if it is right to say.
I don't know why, but very popular there. So I've at least 75% of all my clients come from that area of the world.
South Korea, right? That's great.
Well, I mean, I find it amazing that they do, but apparently, you know, a good report, they pass on a good report of things. So it's all by word of mouth, because I haven't done any kind of PR or anything there.
Right. Although
through one of my clients there, she's also very good in English. And she's very organizationally adept, to put it like this.
Right.
So I'm putting together, because the students have had bits and pieces of what I'm writing now, little parts, and they really would like to know more about the living soul, for example. So I'm working on a set of 3 lectures to be able to give, where I go through in much more detail, but online, and it'll be translated from English to Korean for them.
Right.
So that's just, these kind of projects I'm working on. That's why I broke down and I bought myself Zoom Professional so that I can have larger meetings, and I can do the same with my students and do the same with these people. And so there's going to be a lot of,
astrological exchanges. So.
Yeah, because traveling for me, I'm 72 years old. So traveling is not so easy as it used to be for me. I can still travel. I'm healthy, and, you know, I'm okay. but traveling in the world today, there's a lot of places that require COVID passports, this, that, and the other. In Norway, I've had COVID, and I'm brisk and I'm happy, and there's no problems. So, but I can't document that. How do you document that? We don't have COVID passports in Norway. People coming to Norway, there's no restrictions. Just so people know, if they want to come to Norway, you're welcome at the border, and then nobody's going to ask you for a certificate or proof of non-infection and things like this hysteria that's going around. So Sweden also is that way now. Iceland. So there's most of Scandinavia is opened up now, as far as that's concerned. I know the UK is opened up like that. You don't need anything to travel there anymore. So it's hard for me to travel. So, well, it's harder for me to travel these days. But we have like we're talking now, I can talk online, I can do a whole lecture, and I can have people there to translate. And so why not? I mean, I'll use the media that we have. And if it's a blessing to people, then great. That's the bottom line. So yeah, a lot of projects. In my life right now, every day I kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this today and I'll do that today. I tried. There was a couple months that I got very sidetracked because I have a lot of kids. Okay, first of all, I have seven children here in Norway. And, a whole passel full of grandkids, and at the beginning of the year, January, February, well, February and March mainly, everybody decided to get COVID at the same time. I mean, nobody got deathly ill or anything from it. I mean, everybody was fine. We had treatment for all the adults in any case. The children had no problems. I mean, there was no complications anywhere.
Right.
But being the grandpa and having already had COVID, I had to do a lot of cooking and changing diapers, and I got called on to do all those things again. Which, I loved it. It was nice. I mean, we do what we have to do in life, right? So I had a couple of months that was everything kind of got put onto hold, clients, everything, and I had to write a whole bunch of letters and say, I'm sorry, this has come up. I have to, move reschedule everything. So, but everybody's been very understanding about that. So.
Sure.
Parts of life.
Wonderful. And I think that pretty much brings us towards the end of this discussion. I think I never had much to ask because you kind of said everything. So, so thank you so much for doing this, and I surely enjoyed it.
Oh, well, you know what, Ashwin, I always enjoy talking with you.
Thank you very much. And
we get to share a lot of things,
sure,
which is nice.
Right. So, yeah. So,
okay.
Right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
We will talk to you again, sir. Bye-bye.